Hey guys, it's coming out for the series premiere of The Punisher, Season 1, Episode 1, 3 a.m. And obviously, guys, I was hyped for this premiere. This has really not been that strong of a year for Marvel TV. I definitely will say that. But knowing The Punisher was coming out and also Runaways on Tuesday, this did definitely get me excited to see where, these shows were really going to go. I was really hoping the show could kind of save Marvel Netflix because, I mean, Iron Fist, I didn't think was terrible, but it just was really disappointing. And Defenders, I really did enjoy. I will definitely say that. It's not sticking with me the way the other shows did. That is for sure. I still really had a fun time with Defenders, but no, it wasn't the big spectacle that everyone expected it to be. Punisher, however, definitely seemed like it could have been. Like, it would have been the best of the Marvel Netflix shows we've gotten all year. And I will say this, while I didn't absolutely love this premiere, I still thought this was an incredibly strong start. I thought this perfectly got us into, the show overall, and this definitely makes me very intrigued to see where the show is going to go. We're just going to get into it right now because I definitely do want to talk about it, and I love the way the episode starts because we see Frank, he's playing guitar for his daughter. We can tell obviously this is a flashback, and simultaneously he's in prison, he's playing the guitar, and I love the way this is intercut. You can see that, he's just a man that is full of he's chocked full of memories, and pretty much everything reminds him of something. We definitely do see that here, and this is something we didn't really get into in Daredevil. Like, obviously his main purpose in Daredevil was to basically kill anyone that was instrumental in the death of his family and basically demolish his entire life. But here, we're getting even more into the character, and I really did love seeing that. We see him rural Alabama. He chases after two men on motorcycles. He guns them down, runs them over, continues on his way, and in Juarez, Mexico, Punisher draws a bead on a cartel drug lord as he goes into a club, and once he has a clear shot, the Punisher just shoots him in the head, and if anyone thought that the Punisher was getting soft and that maybe he wasn't going to be as tough as he was, that opening scene should definitely give you the indication that no, he still is just as badass. He still is just as much the violent, unapologetic man that he was in Daredevil, and I really did love that. But he's also incredibly sympathetic, and that's something I really did love about Frank Castle in this first episode. But we then see at JFK International Airport, a nervous man named Mickey O'Hare goes into the restroom. He checks his boarding path. He then gets into a stall and makes a call, in confirming that he's the only one left. So Punisher then smashes his way into the stall. He hits Mickey in the face. Mickey begs for his life. He says he has a family. Punisher points out that he doesn't, and just that one line perfectly, makes you care for the Punisher. I mean, sure, you're like, he's a badass, but at the same time, you're like, this guy, you really kind of feel bad for him because he has nothing. And Mickey asks him what difference it makes that he's dead. Frank tells him nothing. The man yells in pain. The two businessmen outside assume that Mickey and Punisher are having sex, and they walk out. Punisher chokes the man, and we see he actually does burn his costume. So he's basically done. He's done being the Punisher for right now. He's gone after everyone that he could possibly kill, and I thought this was a fantastic setup. It's perfectly showing us basically the end of, Frank's hit list. He's gotten after everyone that he's needed to, and now we can actually get into the main plot of the show. So we then get to 6 months later, and Frank at this point, he's got like a full beard. He's calling himself by a different name at this point, and I definitely really did like this portion of the episode because, like I said, I like that this wasn't just, oh, Punisher, look how cool he is killing people. They actually do give him a lot of character in this first episode, and like I said, he's going by the name Peter Castigailon. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but that's the name he's going through right now. But he's pounding on a concrete wall at a construction site. He's slowly chipping away at it. The workers lead the new man, Donnie Chavez, past Frank. Later, the workers tell Frank that it's lunchtime, but Frank hammers a little longer. He then goes up on the roof to eat lunch, then goes back to work. He continues through the night screaming in rage and remembering his dead children. And there are many times throughout this episode where he harkens back to certain memories, and he finally drops the hammer, covered in his bloody handprints, goes to his apartment to wash up, and once he's done, he eats and remembers having a picnic with his family. And he lies on the bed and reads a photo of his family on the bedstand, and the next morning, He imagines his wife Maria next to him in bed as he wakes up. He goes back to work hammering. A worker asks him what the story is with him, and the worker warns that they don't pay Frank extra for coming in early and leaving late. And he and the others, except Donnie, figure that Frank is nuts and that he essentially is he's crazy. I mean, that this is a guy who's just so crazy and they can't at all trust him, but we know that's definitely not the case. Sure, Frank is someone who definitely is on a bit of a rampage, and he's definitely a very volatile man, but he's definitely not crazy. He knows very well what he's doing, and he kills who he wants to, and he spares who he needs to. So he definitely is not crazy. He knows very well what his agenda is. So their leader Lance tells them that they're getting less overtime because of Frank, and they kick his lunchbox away, and Frank turns to face them and hand tightens on the sledgehammer. And as the workers leave, Donnie asks if he can go with him, and they say that there's no room. Frank watches from above and sits down. Donnie goes up to join him and introduce himself, and he asks why Frank comes up there, and Frank says it's because no one else does. And undeterred, Donnie offers Frank one of his sandwiches, and Frank takes one if Donnie will stop talking, but Donnie refuses to make any sort of promises, and he talks about how all the workers are upset because they need the money, and he points out the scars on Frank's chest, and Frank says that he was in the Marine Corps, and Danny tells him that his father was in the Corps and was killed with his wife in a car accident. So yeah, Donnie and Frank, there's definitely a lot of similarities that these two do share. They both have had significant losses in their life, and he came to New York City to live with his grandmother, and Frank thanks him for the sandwich but says he's not looking for a pal, and he's not whatever Donnie is looking for. He's not looking for friends right now. He's very much he's very much an introvert, and you can definitely tell that throughout this whole episode. And it makes sense too, because he's trying to cover up his identity, and if he shares too much with Donnie, he's gonna start to make comparisons that, holy shit, you're very similar to the Punisher. So he's doing what he can to try to distance himself from pretty much any sort of social contact right now. So that night, he goes to a support group run by an ex-soldier, Curtis Hoyle, and as Frank stands outside listening, Curtis welcomes the newcomers. One ex-soldier, O'Connor, talks about the liberal assholes running the country into the town, and another ex-soldier, Lewis Wilson, says he fought for the country and it has no place for him. And this scene could have potentially gotten very overbearing and very preachy. Like, they could have been them forcing it down our throat. And obviously, given the nature of the show and the time period, you knew gun control was going to come up. You knew that was going to be a big subject in this first episode. And I like the way they portrayed it. It's just them talking about it. It's not too heavy-handed. And I really did enjoy it here. I thought they did a good job with addressing it, but not, completely having it overtake the entire episode. So O'Connor insists that the time will come when they have to defend themselves. Lewis tells the group that they risked their lives and did terrible things, and it meant nothing when they got home. So again, they did a good job really addressing this subject and not, like I said, forcing it on our throats like I was worried they were going to. But after the meeting, Curtis asks Lewis how he's sleeping. Lewis says the group helps and so does reading, and Curtis tells him that answers have to be his own. So once Lewis leaves, Frank comes in, tells his friend there was a good meeting, and Curtis points out that it's been a while, and Frank gives him back the book that he loaned him, and Curtis, he knows who Frank really is. He knows his true identity, and as Frank gets coffee, Curtis says that Lewis drives a cab, and part of the problem is that no one really wants to be themselves, and he wonders what will make Frank happy. He figures that Frank hurts himself before anyone else can, and Curtis insists that Frank Castle is dead, but Frank is his new ID, is alive, and everyone who killed his family is dead. So he basically, what he's saying is he stripped himself of that title of Frank Castle, and now he's a whole other being entirely. So he says that Frank is just punishing himself, and Frank thanks him for the coffee and starts to go. And I would agree with that. I think Frank is completely okay with punishing himself. He doesn't give a shit what happens to him. He just wants to make sure that, he gets his vengeance on the people that really did wrong him. So, however, he stops and asks Curtis if he thinks about what they did. Curtis tells him his conscience is clear and tells Frank to stop wallowing in his self-pity before he beats him to death with his fake leg. Frank then chuckles and leaves, and the next day we get to this character of Agent Dinah Mandini, and this was easily the weakest point of the episode for me. We've had a lot of FBI agents in the show, but this is easily one of the weakest. I really did not care about this character, but she pulls up to ICE headquarters, goes in, she tracks heroin traffickers on a board in her office, and she tells her new partner, Sam Stein, that her last partner, Ahmed Zubair, was taken from his home in Kandahar, shot in the head, and buried in an unmarked grave. So she insists that Sam isn't her partner. He points out that they, according to their assignments, and Dinah tells him that he has to earn her trust first, and Sam warns her that their boss, Carson Wolf, herself might not let them run with what she's gathered, and Dinah insists that her case does have merit. So Carson comes in, wants to hear the case that she brought back from Afghanistan, and Dinah explains that Ahmad discovered that American soldiers were trafficking heroin, and they killed him, and Carson orders Sam out, tells Dinah that her investigation was deemed worthless. They pulled her out before she hurt her career, and Carson says that Ahmed might have been dirty, and Dinah figures that she was pulled out before she found something, and Carson tells her that Kandar is off limits, and smiling, she agrees, and Carson then leaves. So that night, Frank isn't back. He's hammering at the wall. Lance and the others come by. Donnie convinces them to take him with them if he buys the first round for them. They agree and then leave. And Sam then comes in and asks Dinah about her meeting with Carson. He says that he knew that Carson didn't want her case because he assigned Sam to her, and Sam refused to tell her how he got demoted until she earns his trust. So after a moment, Dinah tells Sam to get her whatever he can on a Marine Force recon colonel named Schoonover and one of his men, Frank Castle. So she obviously is going after Castle, and Sam points out that Frank is dead. Sam figures that he's already demoted, so he'll help her, and he's surprised that Dinah wants to actually join him. So basically, they're getting all the information they can on Castle. You can tell that they very much think he's this volatile figure, and this plotline, like I said, I just didn't really care about. I thought it honestly did take me out of the show at points. I'm hoping he gets better, but right now, it's really just easily the weakest story of the show so far. So at the bar, Donnie and the others are closing down the bar. The bartender, Rhonda, looks on, and meanwhile, Lance tells his friend Paulie that he owes money to a loan shark and needs another job. So Paulie says he'll see what he can do. A drunk Donnie then comes back. Lance tells him to pay up. The tab comes to almost $350, and Donnie reluctantly gives in as the other workers cheer him on. And then Frank dreams of being with Maria, and he wakes up. Later at work, he overhears Paulie telling Lance that his cousin got him a job robbing a high-stakes poker game. Paulie explains that it's protected by the Ganucci. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but Lance warns it's dangerous. His friend talks him around. Lance notices Frank sitting nearby. They ask if Frank was listening to them. Lance tells him to mind his own business. Frank gets up. He picks up his sledgehammer. Lance asks if he wants to do something with it. He tells Frank he'll mess him up without a sweat, and Frank just stares at him, and you can just see he's ready to kill this guy. You know, he's ready to just take him down, and a man yells when he breaks his arm. Lance and Paulie then run over. Donnie asks if Frank if he knows first since he was in the Marines, and Frank just walks away. So the ambulance takes the injured workers away. Lance says they should call it off. Paulie tells him that his cousin will figure that they pussied out, and Lance agrees to do it. So they recruit Donnie since the other man is dead, admitting that it's illegal, and they ask if he's in, and Donnie finally agrees without hearing the details. Frank walks by, Donnie glances briefly at him, and at her mother's apartment, we see Dinah tells her mother, Farah, that she resents being forced to come back, and Farah wants to make sure that Dinah is trying to avoid dealing with her guilt. So Dinah clearly is going through something as well. Dinah says she told Ahmed that he could trust her, and when she pours herself a drink, Farah asks how much she's drinking. Dinah insists that she didn't need therapy from her. If anyone, her mother, a psychiatrist, questions her briefly and says it's part of her being a mother and welcomes Dinah back. So Dinah says it's temporary. Farah says that her husband's faith is strong as her lack of it. Her daughter says that she has faith in the system that gave them freedom, but warns it's fragile and needs protection. So Farah finally tells her that her case is hearsay, and basically what Dinah is doing scares her. So it seems like everyone is pretty much, you know, not on Dinah's side except for her. But she feels that she has a case here, but she doesn't realize how dangerous this really is. So again, don't really care about this. We'll just have to see where this really does go. But Frank's in an apartment. He's reading. He stares at the ceiling. And Paulie, Lance, and Donnie drive up to the restaurant where the poker game is. Paulie hands Donnie a gun. They put on masks and go into the game, taking out the one guard. And as Donnie bags the car, the others tell them that no one should be a hero. The Ganucci man, Tony, advises them to leave while they can, and when they ignore him, he says that they're all dead. Donnie grabs the money as the players stare at him. He drops the money, scoops it back. His wallet falls out of his pocket, and Tony sees Donnie's name and says that he really screwed it up. So the next morning, Frank is dreaming of Maria waking him up, kissing him, and going to get breakfast. And you can just tell this is like a recurring cycle for Frank. Every day, he's picturing Maria there, and a masked man comes in, shoots Maria in the head, and Frank wakes up at 3 a.m. So now we know why the episode's called 3 a.m. I was wondering myself what the 3 a.m. title was all about. Now we realize what that's about. He goes back to the construction site, hammers at the wall, screaming in rage. Again, this is just like a coping mechanism for him. This is his way of getting out all of his all of his anger and just the, again, the vengeance in his head. He's really getting it out here. So Lance and the others drive back to the construction site. They meet with Paulie's cousin. Donnie says he bought his license in case they got stopped by the cops. Paulie then beats him, figuring he'll give them to the cops, and prepares to shoot him, and Lance then stops him, saying that Donnie has to disappear and gets the concrete mixer going. Frank then sees them and watches Donnie breaks free, runs into the site, grabs a rebar, prepares to defend himself, but they take him down and kick him. They drag to where they're pouring concrete into the foundation. They toss Donnie in. He tries to clean out, screaming for help, and we get what probably is the most well put together action scene out of any of them all episode. Because Frank then steps out, he tells him to shut off the mixer, and when Lance goes for his gun, Frank disarms him. He breaks his leg with the sledge, beats two of them. Paulie opens fire. Frank takes cover. Lance tries to get his gun. Frank steps on his hand. Meanwhile, Paulie drives off, but Frank comes out, shoots him in the head, tosses the body into the foundation. So he just doesn't care. He'll kill who he needs to, and meanwhile, Paulie then drives off, and he goes to Lance, picks up the sledge, breaks his leg. Frank asks where it went down. Lance gives him the location. Satisfied, he beats him to death with a hammer, tosses him into the foundation, drops a rope in so Danny can climb out. Donnie then hears a car drive off, discovers that the weight on the end of the rope has handwriting on it, telling Donnie to leave town. So basically, he's getting him out of there. So at the restaurant, Tony tells his men to get all three robbers, starting with Donnie. The lights go out. Frank opens fire on the Ganucci thugs. They try to shoot back, but Frank picks them all off except for Tony, and Tony finds the circuit box, turns the lights back on, discovers that all of his men are dead, and Frank then twists Tony's arm around, shoots the man in the head with his own gun before walking out. So he's killed pretty much all he needs to, and then we get to the ending here where we see a man named David Micro Lieberman. He checks the surveillance footage of the crime scene, spots Frank, and welcomes him back, and these two clearly have some sort of connection, and that is the way this episode ends. So overall, guys, there's definitely a lot of stuff to talk about in this episode, but we're just getting into it right now, starting off with the cast. And easily that is one of the selling points of this show. I think, knowing that there was going to be a Punisher show just made everyone very excited. And that's mainly because of how great Jon Bernthal really is in this role. If anyone was worried that he was holding back or that he wasn't going to be as strong as he was in Daredevil, think again, because he absolutely kills it here. I mean, Frank Castle is one of those characters that can just carry a show all on his own. And Jon Bernthal just does such an incredible job here. Pretty much throughout the course of every scene, you can tell what he's feeling. You can tell, what he's really thinking about in this. Like I said, he is a man that is full of memories. Everything kind of reminds him of something, but he also is set on, destroying anyone that destroyed him. And I really love seeing that. I love how unapologetic he is, but I also love how he's trying to kind of protect people, and he's trying to make sure that he, keeps his identity secret for as long as possible. And I really do love about his character. He's very calculated, he's very cold, and you can see that while he is definitely hiding out, he still does have that, ferociousness and menacing presence to him, and I really do love about his character. He's very rootable, you really do care for him, but he's also incredibly sympathetic. You can really tell what he's going through, and that's something I really loved about his character. He's not just a badass, he actually does have a lot of stuff that's gone on in his life, and I really do love about him here, and he really did do a fantastic job pretty much carrying the entire episode for me. Now, as much as I didn't like her character, I did think that Amber Rose Revah as Dinah was actually really good. You can tell that she also is going through some kind of loss, and she feels that she can go after the Punisher. Everyone else is telling her, you're getting yourself into, you're very much in over your head. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this character does go. I thought she overall did a really good job. I'm just interested in seeing, where she really does end up going here. In terms of acting, though, that's really it, because we still have yet to meet most of the main characters here. We haven't met Ben Barnes' character. We haven't met Michael Nathanson's character. The only other main character we really met in this episode was Lewis and Curtis, and both of those characters just didn't leave much of an impression on me. So acting-wise, I thought everyone did do a good job for the most part. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because I will say right off the bat, I thought the tone to the show was great. I love how unapologetic it is. I love how dark it is. And I love that it's not trying to be anything, it's not trying to lighten the tone in any sense. This is a very dark, bleak show, and I love that tone. I think it works very well here. I think it perfectly depicts just how just how sad the world is for Frank, and really just how this isn't really a happy city anymore, and how he really doesn't have much, happiness in his life. And I thought that they predicted that, they portrayed that very well here. I really do love the way that was depicted, and I thought that was definitely very well handled. I thought the tone was fine. The writing, on the other hand, is really my main concern here, because, like I said, everything involving Frank is fantastic. I love that he's hiding out. I love he's got all these, memories and things like that. I loved all the things where, like, he's seeing his wife, and, like, him playing the guitar reminds him of his daughter. I thought that stuff was really strong. As far as the other characters, though, yeah, just not really much to say there, because other than Frank, I honestly didn't give a shit about anyone else in this show. And it's unfortunate, because there are a lot of characters here, and just none of them really did do much for me. Curtis didn't really do much for me. Lewis didn't do much. Dinah certainly didn't do much. I just didn't really care about most of these characters, and that's fine. I mean, most of these Marvel shows, there's been at least one other character I've cared about, but this might be the first Marvel show besides Iron Fist, which, let me just say, these characters aren't bad. They're not Iron Fist levels of bad where they're boring and not interesting. It's just this particular episode, I wasn't that invested, and it could very well be because we didn't get introduced to most of the main characters yet. We still have yet to meet Russo. We still have yet to meet, we're just now meeting the character of Micro, and we only saw him in that one scene. So obviously, I'm not going to get much investment out of, one scene from Micro. It's just not going to happen. So, maybe it's because we haven't met most of the main cast, but right now, I really only cared about Punisher in this first episode, and that's really it. And, again, I don't know if that's gonna change, but right now, I just didn't really have much investment there, especially when it comes to Dinah. Dinah is about as bland as you could possibly get. How many times are we gonna see the hardening cop that's like a hard drinker and thinks she's in over her head? I mean, we've seen that so many times. That was kind of Misty Knight's arc, where she thought she knew what she was doing, but she really wasn't that great of a cop. We really did see that here. So I'm hoping they do something different with Dinah. I'm hoping this isn't just a retread of other things we've seen in other Marvel shows. I will admit, I thought they handled the topic of gun control really well in this first episode. They talked about it in one scene. It didn't overshadow the entire episode, and I thought it was handled in a very, organic way. It made sense why they'd be talking about it. It made sense why the situation would come up, and I thought they definitely handled that in a very, like I said, natural way. It felt natural for the story. It didn't just feel like it came out of nowhere, and I did think they handled that quite well here. The action in the show is definitely one of these standpoints. From an action standpoint, this show is a masterpiece. I mean, this show really goes all out. A lot of people were saying how Marvel was getting soft. Well, this show should show you that's definitely not the case, and for me, this show needs to be really ultra violent, because again, of how unapologetic our main lead really is. He will go after anyone that he needs to. Anyone that gets in his way, he will just kill. He doesn't care. He's just that unapologetic. He's that cold. He doesn't care if he has to kill them. He doesn't care if he has to batter them. I mean, we're going to see a lot of violence in the show. It's probably going to be the most violent show we've seen on Marvel Netflix yet, and I'm completely fine with that. I love the way this is going. I think it's definitely the direction to take it. The score is great. I really love the intro of this show. It's really different from some of the other intros we've had, but what I really love about the Marvel Netflix shows is that they try to establish some sort of music genre for each of these shows, and this one's like bluegrass. Like, Daredevil was straight up like epic. Jessica Jones was like a noir. Luke Cage was like a blaxploitation. Iron Fist was, like an amalgamation of many things, but mainly kung fu stuff. That's really what it was trying to be. It wasn't, but it tried to be like kung fu movies. This is more like a bluegrass type tone, which I think is very interesting that that's the tone they're really using here. I guess it makes sense though, because, we saw him playing a guitar in the beginning and things like that. The editing, like I said, for me, this episode really did fly by. I wasn't really bored by any scenes, but there were just some scenes I really was not all that interested in, like anything involving Dinah, I didn't really care about. Anything involving the three guys that wanted to go after Frank, I just didn't really care about. And that might be, again, because they all died, and they didn't really want us to care about them, so I don't really know. For me, though, I still thought this was a very strong first episode. I'm very excited to see where the rest of the show does go. I very much am on board with the idea of the Punisher having his own show. And I'm definitely going to give the first episode of The Punisher, Season 1, Episode 1, 3 a.m., a B. So over, guys, I mean, the series premiere of The Punisher. The most you guys saw the series overall, left your thoughts. And from here on out, guys, I will be reviewing episode 2 in my next video, and then I'm gonna probably review this sporadically like I do with most Netflix shows that come out. But that's in my review. Hope you enjoy. I'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.